Hi, and welcome to Hiss and Tell, a podcast about cat behavior and all things cat related. I'm your host, Christina Wilson, professional animal behaviorist. Today we'll be talking to Susa Gurecki and Stacy Attenberg. Both are independent rescuers out of Connecticut and New York City. We'll be talking about TNR, community cats, rescue work, fostering, what is a feral cat, what's not a feral cat, and so much more. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hiss and Tell. Today's guests are Susie Gurecki, an independent rescuer and fosterer out of Brooklyn, and Stacy Attenberg, also an independent rescuer out of New Haven, Connecticut. We are going to talk today about TNR, community cats, rescue, foster, all of that good stuff. So I'm going to let the two of you just introduce yourselves so I can stop talking. Stacy, why don't you go ahead and go first?
I primarily work out of New Haven and Hamden. I do a lot of trap-neuter-return of feral cats or trap-neuter-rescue and rehabilitate cats that might seem like they're feral at first once they're trapped, but I always assess them to see if they actually are feral or if they're just presenting as such because they're scared. So if they do seem like they have potential, I give them the proper time to decompress and work with them and then get them placed with amazing local rescues. And socializing a lot of, older cats, kittens. I'm a feral feeder. I have 10 different colonies, community cat colonies that I manage with trapping, feeding every day. Doesn't matter the weather conditions. I'm out there, and I've built an incredible network doing this for the last 14 years. So I'm very fortunate.
All right, amazing. Susa, you want to give your spiel about who you are and what you do? And how you came into doing this?
Well, that part's really critical. Yes, so I'm Susa Gurecki, and I am an independent rescuer, TNR volunteer. I foster. I've socialized reluctantly.
But you've become so good at it.
I don't like it. I'm not good at the patient stuff. I also feed local colonies, make sure that they're fixed and vaccinated, similar to Stacy. I just haven't been doing it as long. I rescued my first cat inadvertently in 2018. That's how I reluctantly became a cat person, and then been doing really the volunteer stuff since 2020. And fun fact is that Christina actually got me into it because I had one cat. Christina and I knew each other through mutual friends. And I said, there are these other cats in my yard, and I actually don't really want them there. And Christina said, why don't you put out a litter box and food? And that's how it started. And then I ended up bringing all of those cats inside. And since then, it's been hundreds.
Yeah. Your rescue work has grown exponentially, as have the cats that live with you permanently. Although you're still not up to our status of cats, I do love seeing the amount of cats that you have go from we'll never have more than one to now you have 4 permanent residents, right? Yeah, and I know you've said that's the hard limit, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, if it wasn't for my husband's asthma, it would not be a hard limit. That's really the limiting factor, and at a certain point, I have to make a choice, between do I love my husband? I do. Do I want him to be healthy? I do. Otherwise, I would more.
So can you guys explain, either one of you or both of you, talk about what TNR is and why it's an important practice for managing community cat populations?
People say trap-neuter-release or trap-neuter-return, like return, because they're returning back to their homes, essentially, even though they may not have shelters. That's the area they know. So a lot of people think, I have cats in my yard, I want them removed, put them somewhere else. There are a lot of people that still do barn homes. I personally am not an advocate for barn homes just because there are certain ways to do things and what, we call barn relocation protocols to make sure that the animals stick around. You can't just pick them up and dump them off somewhere because they won't stay.
Right.
But in my own experience and fellow trappers that have also experienced it too, I've known lots of people where we've attempted at doing it the proper way where you have an animal confined either in a barn that's enclosed or in a big crate to get them used to the new area. And they don't, even if you do it for weeks on end and somebody's monitoring its pace, etc., they don't always stick around, even
Right.
with, adjusting to the new surroundings, the smells and stuff. And my big thing is, if you're taking an animal that's out of like an inner city environment and you're putting them out into the wilderness, they don't have the same knowledge of the animals in that area. And I worry about coyotes and fisher cats and, bears and hawks and owls and eagles. I mean, like, this just, the inner city cats are not exposed to that stuff, so they
Right.
have no chance at all of survival. And I've lost a cat to that, and that almost did me in years ago.
Yeah.
I almost stopped doing rescue because of it, because I fought so much in the cat. But needless to say, that's, one thing that I always want to press on, that you can't just trap a cat and remove it from the area that they know. It's like putting somebody in a foreign country where the language is different and they don't know how to survive.
Right.
So,
And I want to just piggyback off. I just want to piggyback off that for a second and just say that that doesn't work for other species either. For people who might be like, oh, well, blah, 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 it should work for cats. When I was learning in my master's program about doing relocation of other animals, especially wolves or other animals that people think are problematic animals, and people want to trap them or put them somewhere else. I think it was the figure was something like 70 or 80% of them do not survive because they don't know where their resources are. Regardless of the species, right. If you take them out of the environment that they're used to, they don't know where they are. They don't know where the resources are. They don't know where their buddies are. They don't know the enemies in that territory, and they tend to not survive. So for people, we think, oh, well, we could just plop them down and they'll be fine because they're wild animals. They'll figure it out. Most of the time, they don't end up figuring it out. And I think a good kind of analogy would be like if you took us and just dropped us off in a foreign country where we didn't speak the language and we had no money, we had no resources, how would we survive? And I think probably not very well. And so I also think when people think about finding all these friendly cats lately in the community cats that you're serving, and I think a lot of that obviously is coming from people moving or just not being able to afford to keep up their cats anymore. And so they're just letting their cats outside thinking, oh, it's a cat. It's going to survive. It's going to be fine. And it's the same thing as it's not going to survive because it doesn't know where its resources are coming from. And so I think that's an important thing for people to keep in mind when dealing with cats is that, yes, they're a predator, but they're also prey. And just because they can survive outside doesn't mean they're going to.
True. Yeah, no, people try to relocate wildlife all the time, like dogs and raccoons, etc. And it drives me nuts. Because I'm like, you're also, if they have babies out there, all those animals are going to die because the way they're carrying. Trap-neuter-return to me is, just to bring the animals back to where they're from. These are animals that can't be socialized, that don't want to be inside, like your Mr. PP, who you tried with. Not everybody will adjust. And I think it's really important that, an issue that I have with rescuers and trappers, just that I've seen for years, is that, I get, like, there's not the resources. A lot of people don't have the time or the energy or the space or the ability or understanding of the behavior. But to really allow animals the time to decompress and assess them properly, because so many friendly cats get dumped back outside because they're deemed as feral when they present that way. Because think about it, you're in a small trap, you're terrified.
Of course.
I would be, all these small, strange smells and places and, new place and these giant creatures hovering over you, doing stuff in the trap and doctors' offices. It's just crazy. So that part drives me crazy that there's not proper assessment done and how many families are actually being dumped back outside.
What do you think would be a good amount of time for people to give a cat to kind of bring them back under threshold of anxiety for you to be able to properly assess them? Would you say like a week, 2 weeks, a month? Like how long do you think people should be prepared to give the cat to kind of come back down from that initial anxiety?
Realistically, I think it matters per animal.
Right.
I judge it based per animal, and a minimum I give of 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because, the first week is like shell shock and they're trying to get used to your routine and, all the changes and everything. But, if I don't see any like obvious stuff in their behavior changing, or if I just sometimes I just get a sense of whether or not they're going to come around or, if they're lunging at me. And even still, I've had cats lunge and hiss at me that have turned out to just be the cats I can hit.
Sure.
So you never know.
Fine. What do you think, Susa, about like how long do you tend to give the cats? And I know you have a little bit, sometimes a different situation when they just show up on your porch. You get a little bit of a different assessment, but how long do you tend to give them in terms of an assessment
Well, it's
period?
not just I don't have the luxury of giving them that much time, right?
Right.
I want to give every cat as much time as possible. But I'm one constrained by space, right? There two, we have I mean the number of homeless cats in New York years ago was assessed at 500,000 or estimated at 500,000. It has to be more now. Because if it was 500,000 6 years ago, yes, there are more rescuers. I only got into it in that time frame, but it's impossible to keep up. So I often will make a very intentional decision of I'm going to go out, I'm going to do a TNR project, and unless a cat is obviously friendly, I will, as long as I know they have a feeder and they have shelter, I will return them. I will recover them for as long as it takes, right? But also return them as quickly as I can because it is so uncomfortable in a trap, right?
Right.
I frankly never feel good about putting a cat in a trap. I have two cats in traps right now in my basement. It's warm. They're fed, I clean multiple times a day, but it's, yes, it would be like being in a jail cell, for them. I think we have this unrealistic expectation sometimes as rescuers of, well, they should be happy I'm bringing them food, and they don't have that on the street. They don't have, a bowl of Friskies twice a day. Yeah, but isn't that also what jail is?
Yes.
You're confined. There's someone who brings you food, but you're still in a place where nothing smells like what you're used to. The traps are covered intentionally, but it's still very uncomfortable. So, with males, I return them within 24 to 48 hours. And unless they're obviously friendly, or if it's a slow time and I have room, then I might give them a chance. But, if there were no space constraints, no personal constraints around allergies in the house, yes, I would want to give them, a week or two or longer, but that's just not always possible, or often it isn't. And so if my choice is between doing nothing and letting a colony proliferate, or at least getting them fixed, making sure they're recovered well, they're vaccinated, and they have a feeder and shelter to go to, I would still choose the latter.
Sure.
But yeah, it's always bittersweet. I always say my favorite part is to return them, but it's also sad because you're returning them to an urban environment where, they didn't choose to be born there. They didn't choose to be dumped there. Well, and dumped cats I generally will not put out because they clearly belong inside.
Right. So thank you for that. When you guys do your TNR work, obviously the N stands for neuter, which is neuter or spay, so that cats cannot go ahead and create additional cats for this problem to be compounded. So that I think is the most important part. When I do it, I like to also get the cats vaccinated for rabies, and then also with the first shot of FVRCP vaccine, which vaccinates against 3 contagious diseases. As you guys know, I'm just going to say it for the listeners. It's feline viral rhinotracheitis, feline calicivirus, and panleukopenia. Which we did recently have a scare in our house about, and that was terrifying. So I'm curious if you guys get the cats vaccinated. If you don't, what's going on?
I can start.
Susan.
So I always also do flea meds. Yes, the revolution is going to last a month, but at least it's a month of relief, right? And if they have tapeworms, it'll help there. I chip every cat, every feral, because I always, register them to me because if they later turn out to be friendly or, God forbid they die, I would want to know. I'm invested in every single cat that I take off the street, whether it's temporary or not. So chip, of course, neuter, all the vaccines, chip, flea treatment. And then I also like to give them a dewormer for the time that they're in the trap. Again, yes, it's temporary, but it's relief that is possible for me to give them.
Stacy?
Same with the vaccines, both the vaccines, I also do revolution treatments, and I do dewormer as well. I don't actually microchip the cats. I wouldn't be able to afford that on top of everything else. I also am a believer. And I know this is so I come from the old school mentality that you don't snap test for feline AIDS and leukemia for ferals. But I personally feel like, because a lot of people feel like if you do that, you have positive tested cats, you shouldn't release them back out because it's, not a responsible thing. But I personally feel like, for me, I feel like it's more responsible for my own being and my own, how I view it, is to snap test everybody that comes in. And if they are positive, then I make a decision. Is the cat fractious? Is the cat a strong positive for leukemia? If the cat is a strong positive and fractious, and I have nowhere for the cat to go, then I feel like it's more humane to euthanize that animal than to spread that disease, because it is so contagious. But if the cat is not fractious and is leukemia positive, then I do a retest. If the cat is a pregnant cat that's a strong positive, I'll do a retest. And I know of a doctor that creates colostrum, which is what the mama cat, it's basically what has all the strong antibodies and, what the moms produce the first, week of their life as they're nursing, that gives, their immune system, what they need. So I know a doctor that actually knows how to create a synthetic colostrum, and has actually taken cats from a leukemia mom before she was able to groom them and potentially transfer the virus. And that'll help them and got them healthy, and the mom still ended up being positive, but got placed with other positive cats. But I feel like for me, I need to know them. If I'm positive, I usually don't release them back out. I work with them, as I have in the past, because I figure they're already out there. They already have the established territory. If I've neutered them, they're less apt to fight. So
Right.
That's just something that I believe for myself that I need to do.
We don't have that option in New York, at least for the ASPCA, which is where we get most of our appointments. They will not, by policy, snap test a cat that comes in a trap.
Really?
Yeah, so we can't do it. And it's because I think of that old school way of thinking, of if the cat does test positive, then what do we do, right? So yeah, you can't do it. Just like you can't have a cat ear tip that comes in a carrier, which is also interesting. So they already create a very strict paradigm of it's either friendly or feral, and it either gets friendly services or feral services. There are some other low-cost options, where I guess you could do it, but it's not routinely done by any of the rescuers that I'm connected with here in New York. So it's interesting that it's even an option. I will say that I've recently learned through FELB seminars that it's actually a lot less contagious than it has been previously thought, that FELB doesn't get transmitted unless there is, a month of intense exposure. So that's apparently the latest, but that actually has nothing to do with why I don't snap test. It's because we can't, and I don't know if I would. But yeah, we can't. I just completely keep, I just keep the cats all separated in my house.
I did want to bring up that fact with you, Susa, about I when I was living in New York, I had an amazing deal with my wonderful friend, Dr. Gina Rendon, who was the first guest on the podcast, who really helped me so much in my own rescue work over the years. I was able to do microchipping and snap testing and all of that stuff through her. And so that was really helpful. But I know when you take cats into the ASPCA, like you said, Susa, they're already pre-sorted, right? So you have to bring in cats in traps, right? For them to be able to do certain types of services. And then if you want other services, they have to be in carriers. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
I actually am going to start by talking about the sign-up process for low-cost spay-neuter in New York, if that's okay.
Yeah,
so
please.
If you remember when the COVID vaccines first came on the market, there would be, someone saying on this website over here, you can right now sign up for appointments. You have basically 50 seconds or something like that. And then all the spots are gone. That's what happens every month in New York City when the ASPCA opens their books for low-cost spay-neuter appointments for rescuers. And that is only rescuers who registered with the ASPCA, I want to say before fall of 2022, something like that. So I'm lucky that I did that in time, because plenty of rescuers who got into it after have not even been able to sign up with the ASPCA and have zero access to these appointments. So every month, the ASPCA opens their books toward the end of the month at 6 a.m. on a random weekday with usually a couple of days' notice. And there are usually around 1,300 appointments available for the next month, and it's usually more rescuers who are eligible. So on average, every rescuer gets, I don't know, 0.9 appointments for the following month. That's obviously not how it ends up shaking out, right? Some people don't log on. Some people have bad internet, or maybe aren't, they might not be technical. They might have lives that don't allow them to be online at 6 a.m. on the dot. But at this point, it really is like signing up for a COVID vaccine in March of 2021. It's crazy. And so we do that. I generally get pretty lucky because I now, of course, have developed a system. And, I will pick a day where my work allows me to go in the morning before work drop off, however many cats I'm able to get in, and then toward the end of the day, go pick them up. So we all arrange our lives around these precious, precious appointments. And then there's essentially an underground marketplace where we trade with each other because this person might have gotten appointments for a day that doesn't work for them anymore, or they don't have enough cats. And so that is how we gain access to ASPCA spay neuter appointments, which for a long time was the only game in town. Now there are a few others. There is Cat Cafe, which is in Brooklyn Heights, where it's more expensive, but at least it's available. There is Flatbush Vet, which is a low-cost clinic that opened up just last summer, run by Flatbush Cats, who have done a really, really amazing job setting up an organization. But again, very, very focused on Flatbush as a rescue area. And now we as rescuers have access, but again, it's more expensive than the ASPCA. So we have some options, but none of them are free unless you get literally nothing else done at the ASPCA and you just do the mandatory shots or the basic shots and the spay neuter. Everything else you start paying for. And that is how we go about it. And I think none of us could be doing any of this work in New York, at least if we weren't all connected in some way and start trading appointments with each other.
To hear just a difference from Connecticut to New York, we're literally a state over. Just the obstacles that you guys have to deal with. I used to be on the board of directors for the Greater New Haven Pet Project, and was dealt with a lot of different avenues there. So that's how I got this relationship with Advancement Orange, Connecticut, and they're very old school about a lot of the things that they do there. They're not like advanced; they don't even have internet service. So, but they're very accommodating, and even say if it's happening the night before, if I don't, I have an appointment the next day for 3 calls, if I only get one or I don't get anybody, and sometimes even if I get 4, I'll call them and let them know, and I have the vet tech's information who does a lot of the surgeries with the doctor, and let her know. So they're very, very kind and flexible. They don't charge you if you don't show up. In Connecticut, it's definitely not that easy, and I know a lot of shoppers in various different cities in Connecticut really struggled during the pandemic trying to find low-cost senior appointments with the clinics, and a lot of them, like I said, the ones that and there was others that were really just very backed up or not doing any surgeries. So I remember seeing a lot of fleas online. I'm like, I can't even give away this resource because they don't have the capability to do 20 or 30 animals a day. They only have maybe max 15 or 16. So, but needless to say, this vet is really the reason I'm able to do what I do. But I know a lot of places use Nutmeg, spay neuter clinic in Stratford, and there's DOA in Hartford, and there's Value Pet. That's it, Value Pet in Fairfield and Monroe, and there's also Highway that offers feral rates there in Fairfield. So there's definitely a lot more options there to be, and the place that used to be around that closed down, they're trying to work on getting that back up and running because that was a really valuable resource. But yeah, it's been an obstacle for everybody. I feel like no matter where we are, but we don't have to jump through the hoops necessarily that you guys do in New York, where there's one random day. And I can't even imagine having to work like that. I'm sure you just have adapted that that's what the norm is, and I feel like I'm spoiled spoiled with this connection that I have.
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about the voucher program that we have here in Connecticut? Because I think a lot of people are led to believe, as I was when I first moved here, that, oh, Connecticut is really devoted towards this cause of spay neutering all of its feral and community cats. And, you know, we provide vouchers to people to help them defray costs for spay neutering. And then when I looked into it a little more, it is actually very difficult to get the vouchers, and is actually something that I have noticed that there is kind of an underground barter system, like Susie was talking about, for the appointments that rescuers use for exchanging these vouchers. So it's a little bit the same. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, or if you ever use vouchers.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Those things are godsend.
Mm-hmm.
So they're called ASPCA vouchers, which stands for Animal Control Population Program. And the state of Connecticut offers low-income ASPCA vouchers for people that are essentially low income if they apply, but they have a very short window of time to use them if they're granted them. So there's an allotment of those for people that are lower income. And a lot of them at the end of the year end up going unused, which just burns my britches, because I think to myself, all those unused vouchers could go to the rescues and still get used. Why don't they just do that? All these unused, vouchers, allocate them to the people that actually are doing the work. So, but the way that the process works for the APCD vouchers for rescues is, so I myself as an independent rescuer would not be able to apply for them, or anyone else that is. It has to be a nonprofit 501c3 or a shelter that applies for them. And the shelter actually can use them for dogs as well, which I didn't realize until a few years ago. And that's usually what their hands are done. And so it has to be a testing that will allow them. Certain vets, the full cost is covered, and it usually is spay neuter, and the first set of vaccines is the only thing that's covered. But, some vets will do additional meds on board, or other, things that they might charge for medical waste, etc. So and I know that they definitely just raise the fee, so it's not always all included in a voucher, but the vet that I work with thankfully is. So, the only thing that I end up paying for if I'm using a voucher is the Revolution and the Snapshot, or an additional, like an injury where they need medication, and an air tip. So if you're using an APCP voucher, it's mandatory that the cat is ear tipped, and the cat has to be a feral cat. And, most of the time, unless you said, like, there's outwardly friendly ones, you just assume they're all feral until you know. So, because a lot of them present that way. So, I never know, 9 out of 10 times I'm talking to them being friendly. I have no idea. It might be very outwardly friendly that I can't use a voucher. But so, over the years, they've changed the time periods of, when the vouchers need to be used up. So, for the rescues or the shelters, the window of time to use them is a lot longer. Mm-hmm. And that's changed, tremendously over the years. One year they didn't do it at all. They used to do it twice a year. Now it's once a year. And, they've heard everybody's pleas, like, can you please extend longer, because there's no way we can get all these, in the middle of winter when the cats are down. Some people don't even trap in the winter. And then you have a month, the rest of the other month, to get them turned back into the sea, all the paperwork, all the numbers, and all the, vet information. And the vet has to mail out a copy to the sea as well, so they can match everything up, make sure there's no discrepancies.
Oh, this reminds me of something somewhat related. There were actually 2 points that I was hoping to make. I do think that there's some competition in New York, at least among some rescue organizations. And so when you think about these ASPCA appointments and the total number available, any rescue organization that has a lot of volunteers with the right ASPCA registration and login, they're automatically in a better position to get a lot more appointments. So there are certain organizations that have a lot of volunteers logging in at 6 a.m. and they might get 10% of all available appointments versus, independent rescuers or, smaller rescue organizations where you have a handful of people maybe signing up. And even they're in a better position because you have a handful of people signing up for under the same organization. But it's definitely a really tricky distribution system. So I'm jealous of the vouchers. We have none of that. Yeah, sometimes we have spay-a-thons in the summer where, some some charity will fund a day or a couple days of, mass low cost spay neuter, which is great. And, they usually have maybe not so tenured vets doing it for practice, right? So, which is still better than nothing, but you definitely don't get the best vet care. And if I'm being totally honest, I'm not sure that I would send my own pet under those circumstances, but it's better than, for a community cat, it's better than having none of that. And then, Christina, I also realized I didn't answer your question earlier about making a decision early on when you send a cat to the ASPCA, whether you send it in a trap or send it in a trap or in a carrier. It does feel like a lot of pressure the morning of. When you have a cat that is on the spectrum or is so not very clearly feral, right, is maybe afraid, it feels like you're sort of playing God because you are deciding, do I send this cat as a friendly or as a feral? And it doesn't feel good. I always give myself the option, right? If there's a chance I can send the cat in a carrier and I have a chance of either placing that cat or holding on to the cat for a little bit longer until I can find a foster, then I will do that. It's also not that an ear tip cat will not be adopted. So sometimes we send them in a trap, but then if they turn out to be friendly, well, then you just have an ear tip cat who has to get snap tested later and gets the friendly services. But it definitely feels like a lot of extra pressure on top of all the other pressures that you face as a rescuer.
That makes sense. Can you guys talk a little bit again individually, and I'm going to start with you, Susa, about how you actually go about trapping the cats? And I know I've seen you over the years using multiple different techniques, and I know you've become really good at like pulling the trap. So you go ahead, Susa, and then we'll move to you, Stacy. And then I might jump in with my crappy trapping. We'll see. Christina's crappy trapping.
CCT. No, KCT.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, my preferred method is, just having a cat walk into a box trap. That's my favorite thing. And, I set up the box trap and the cat is already trap trained and the cat will just walk in, the trap snaps shut, and I'm right there with my cover. That's almost never how it works, especially not in a colony setting where some of them are already fixed, so you have to be targeted, or you don't have enough, you want to get maybe the pregnant one before you get the others, or you want to get the kittens before you get the adults, things like that. So, but that's my number one. If we're just ranking like Susa's top 4 or 5 ways of trapping, box trap, nothing else. Second favorite is box trap with the bottle and string, where again, the cat will go into the box trap, but I'm waiting for a specific cat to go into the box trap, and I'm right there and I can pull the string that is attached to a bottle, which keeps the trap open. And the reason why I like that is because once that box trap is shut, the only rush that I'm in is to put a cover over the trap so the cat can calm down, but there is no risk of the cat getting out of the trap. Which brings me to my number 3, used to be my least favorite method of trapping, which is a drop trap, which is essentially a cage that falls down on the, over the cat when you pull the string. But you have to be very quick to run to the box trap because especially if you have a strong or very panicky cat under, they might be able to get out by lifting up the trap. And there is also a risk of injury because they kind of bounce around and they hit their face on the side. So that's it's still, I would say, least favorite, but I've gotten more comfortable with it. There was a time when I botched a couple of drop trap endeavors in pretty legendary ways. So then I had, like, the cats didn't get injured. I just really screwed up and cats got out. And so I've now trapped successfully with the drop trap often enough that I now feel very comfortable using it. And then there's also the part where you get a friendly cat, like I did the other night. A cat just walked up to me on my friend's block at 11:30 p.m. No one knew the cat. And so I called my friend, who's also a rescuer, and I said, bring me a can of food and a carrier. And I put the can of food in the carrier. The cat walked in and we closed the door. So those would be my methods. I think the most important part almost of trapping is the 2 most important parts are schedule, right? You make sure that the cat's actually on a schedule, maybe even trap trained, so gets fed under a trap or around a trap, inside a trap for a few days. Sometimes I've had to do, there's a cat that I stalked for 2 years, and it took months of trap training that cat. And the other part is the community work. I do think we should talk about that too, right? Really getting to know your neighbors, knowing how they feel about the cats, who feeds, when do they feed, are they open to putting a trap in their yard? So that's actually the bigger part of the work. If it was just about grabbing a trap, going out, putting some food in, and waiting for the cat to go in, and it would be faster and less work. But I also think it's some of the most fulfilling parts of the work, because I've made connections in ways that I never would have connected with my community before. And, we learn together, which is also really nice. Or they ask me, hey, how are those kittens doing that you trapped 2 years ago? And I can show them pictures of how well they're doing in their homes. So that is my whole trapping routine.
All right. And I'm totally with you on the community building. We really did that, when we were living in the city on Avenue D. Over the 20 years that I lived there, I really became known as the lady that you go ring her doorbell if you see any kind of animal, but especially a cat, or if you have a cat question. I just get random people from the neighborhood being like, my cat's been having diarrhea. What can you, and I'd hand them little pumpkin for cats things. And but it was really nice because you do get to meet all your neighbors. And then when there were things like these cats that are behind me that I rescued from the creepy, gross bodega that was across the street from us, and they were hiding in the walls in the grossest, moldiest, hoarded conditions, where there were also fruits and vegetables. But I've never seen a place so filthy. Someone just came and was like, hey, the place is handing out kittens. You guys should really go over there. This is not right. And we went and trapped them. It took several days, like you said, of, trap training and being in there with handling gloves and all of this stuff. They were filthy. They were a mess, but now they're happy. One of them is now an emotional support cat and living in college with our vet's daughter and her partner. And then the other two are very, very happy with a good friend of mine. And it's just such a nice story, but none of that would have happened if we hadn't built community who understood the work we were trying to do and also wanted to take part. So that's my little spiel. Now, Stacey, over to you in the cars.
If you
But I'm trying to think, how do I track? Well, it really depends. I definitely, what you said on the community stuff, that's so spot on. Getting permission to be on site on somebody's property and not just trespassing. I know people that would just show up on site, or some people are weird about you setting up even if you get permission. Some other people want the cats around for rodent control and
right.
Blah blah blah. Or they don't understand the importance of spay and neuter. I guess my favorite standard ways of tracking are with a true. I used to use have a heart back in the day, but they're just so loud and scary that I'm just not a fan of them. And I feel like the cats really can hurt themselves a lot more in those, especially when they panic and smash in their faces. So the true cats, the nice thing about those is, it's easy. You got the two entrances, the back door, easy release to get wildlife. A big thing that I always say to people when I'm training people how to trap, never leave a trap unattended. Never. Because A, if you get wildlife, you need to release them. And B, you don't know who's watching, who's in the area. And you trapping an animal, if the animal's sitting there, you're putting them in harm's way. So you have to be able to get over to that animal, and if the trap is uncovered, be able to cover it, like you said, calm them down. Or to, just be able to pull them from the area. With a true trap, the one thing that's bad about it is where the front door is. They have the rings that slide up. If the cat's determined enough and you've got on them, they can pull the cover right through and lift those rings and get out. And it's funny, a trapper that is local in Connecticut who has been doing it twice as long as I have, she's very experienced. She had somebody on the trap. She had like a sheet or whatever on the trap, and she went to go get the cat after somebody covered the cat. And then the cat did this, the cap's empty. She called me. She said, have you ever seen that? I said, yes, unfortunately. I always think pet cleaners and those little twisties, block, garbage bag tags and simple sit downs in the middle for the front door to the base of the trap so that they can't get out once I have them in there. But so that's my standard way of trapping, and I kind of base it on the weather conditions. So I'll trap out in the rain, I'll trap out in the snow and the sleet. People are like, how do you do that? It's all about location, covering the traps properly so that they don't get soaked, they have space to go in, because they still will come out, but not as many of them to incrementally as, you would get on a dry, warmer day. But I will, that's my standard way of doing it is with the two cats. And then uh, if I have a hard to catch cat or I can't vaccine, so I've had vaccines a lot as well, and that's wonderful, helpful situation, even if you've got like a trail camera to monitor a safe environment to see what time of day they're coming. Um, that's been a very helpful tool. But if I can't vaccine, which is a lot of the times based on my location, and really savvy cats, as we call them, cats that have seen other cats pass or won't go anywhere near it, even with all my, tricks that I use to try to get them in. I've tried all kinds of various things, and some cats fall for things, and some don't because they're really smart. But for the ones that are tough, I break out the trap, and I like that too, but I haven't worked with them in years. Um,
I have a question about the true catch.
yeah,
Is that the tomahawk one, the one that closes very quietly, or is it a totally different one? I need to look it
it's
up.
its own brand.
Oh, I
Yeah, it's its
see.
own brand. It's TRUCACCH. Um, so they're nice because they're coated metal, like a I don't know if it's like a plastic coating, but easy to clean too. I do. I always do like the rescue sanitizer on the trap. But so I was doing that when I had like a hose in the backyard. I could spray everything down. But now that it's freezing out, I can't really do that. So I learned a trick recently, actually, from fellow trappers who've been doing it a really long time. They bring their traps to the car wash. And yeah, I thought that was brilliant. They went to like the individual car wash bays where you can, do it by yourself or self-serve or whatever.
Oh, I thought I was picturing someone putting the trap, like just shoving it through the car wash, and I was like, but did you have to put it on a dolly or something? Like, how'd you send it through the car wash? Like, what? I'm so dumb. What you're saying makes a lot more sense. Oh my God.
They got the high power wash
Yes.
and the soap. But yeah, I felt like a lunatic because I brought all my traps there. So I was like, I have like I think 6 or 7 cat traps. And I have them all outside my crazy cat lady car. I'm like, well, I'm here. I might as well spray my damn dirty car down too, right?
Yeah.
So 'cause I'm paying for it.
Why not? So I want to also have you guys speak a little bit about like why are we doing this in the first place? Like what is the positive impact of TNR not only on the community cats and the cats themselves, but also on the communities that these cats are inhabiting, right? Like can you talk a little bit about maybe some success stories that you've had or just what the positive outcomes of TNR to be?
So in terms of what are the benefits, right? I mean, there's the obvious point about I think we all get into it because we love animals, right? I used to joke that my Instagram handle should have been the reluctant cat lady because I really am still like, I don't even know if I'm a cat person. And, meanwhile, I currently have 9 cats in my house. So there you go. But,
Yeah.
just like I think many other community members, I used to feel good about just putting out food for cats. And then at some point, Christina, you were the one who connected me with a couple of local rescues who helped me get my first community cat neutered. And after that, his girlfriend showed up in my yard and then she brought their kittens. And then that's how I was introduced to trapping, right? And so I think it starts with there are these cats, they seem like they need food and shelter. Oh, and they need homes. But then once you start seeing these cats everywhere, I think most folks think to themselves, well, what am I going to do now, right? I can't find homes for all of them. And so, I mean, the obvious benefit is you kind of stop this sad cycle of reproduction, again, that was never their choice, and that is a really, really hard life. I think right now there is unfortunately a lot of discussion that seems very biased that's either pro-cat or pro-bird that's happening, where the effectiveness of TNR programs is being questioned. There was an article recently in the New Yorker by Jonathan Franzen that frankly was an opinion piece, but
it was.
There was a podcast even more recently, again by a professor who turns out to be a birder and conservationist, but who wrote a book about cats being cuddly killers with a catchy title, right? And so all that is to say, I think there is the obvious impact of you're just trying to have fewer cats on the street, and you're trying to make the lives of those that are out there easier, either by stopping the reproductive cycle or ideally finding them safe homes. For me personally, hi Mimi. For me personally, I need to do something when I see something. So one of my favorite iconic rescuers in New York, Sassy, I always quote her both in rescue and in my corporate job. I say, don't talk about it, be about it. And so I just had to start doing something about it. So it's good for my mental health. It is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done with my life, I would say. It connects me to nature in an urban environment. It connects me to people in my community. It gave me a sense of purpose when I had a big personal loss and the pandemic was happening. So to me personally, it does a lot. It's created a whole different group of friends, that can relate to me in a way that no one else really can. And so I would say there's all of that, that to me is kind of the day-to-day success. Being able to hopefully educate some folks around me. And then, I mean, every cat that I can help fix, or, that I find a home for, like, I know all of their stories. And I think the sweetest moments are, there are times when, I rescue a cat, I find them a home, and then later I might speak to the feeder who says, I never knew what happened to that cat. I thought that cat got run over. And I can show them, here's a picture. This happened recently for a couple of them. For me, I could show them a picture of, not only did you help keep that cat alive, right? And that cat is alive now. Look at this cat here, cuddled up, in a warm bed with a kitty friend. And it's so wonderful, right, to be able to do that.
Yes.
And then I guess I'll speak about one other case that was probably the most emotional rescue, not for me necessarily, but for everyone involved, which was this colony of cats that was on the grounds of a nursing home here in Brooklyn. They contacted me on Instagram. It was a lot of back and forth. And, at one point, my friend and I rolled up with a bunch of traps into this nursing home. And the people working there were like, who are you? What are you doing with all these metal cages?
You're here to trap the senior citizens. Gonna get them.
And, these cats had brought so much joy to the residents there, who were either seniors, or some of them, were nonverbal. And they had socialized these cats by letting them jump into their lap in the wheelchairs. They were, oh my God, they were feeding them milk and potato chips. It was horrifying. But they still, were doing what they thought was right. And so collectively, I ended up actually pulling only one cat, and then I had to leave town, and Flatbush Cats ended up getting in there and finishing the rest of the colony. But trapping this initial cat and having someone who was nonverbal type out on their phone, please find him a good home, and read it out to me while other people are crying because this cat is finally being rescued. I mean, that's insane, like, to be able to do that for people and for the animal and for the community it's just so fulfilling. I don't know how to not do that.
That's a great answer. Yeah.
That's incredible. I love stuff like that. Yeah, I could probably talk for days and years knowing me about that stories. I always say the same thing, that it is the most rewarding thing I've ever done with my life, as well as the most devastating, because it's very emotionally.
We lost her. Ruh-roh.
Hopefully she'll be back.
What advice would you give to somebody who's interested in getting into cat rescue work, or starting their own rescue, or just getting into doing TNR? What advice would you have for somebody who's interested in doing that?
Great question. So my first piece of advice would be, just get started. Don't be afraid. Take the TNR class. It doesn't mean that that's what you're going to do with the rest of your life, with all your free time. That's just some of us. So just get started and see if you like it.
What's
see
the
if it
TNR
gives you
class?
something.
Do you want to tell people what the TNR class is?
Oh, yeah. So, well, you can Google TNR certification, and usually you will get a result that I think normally starts with neighborhood cats, but it is a class that I think it's an online class they run, I want to say once a month. I think it costs $10 and takes a couple hours, and you learn the basics of what is trap-neuter-return, why do you do it, here's how you trap. And it's really just the first step for all of it, right? But this TNR certification opens some doors already. It might mean that you can check out traps from trap banks like the ASPCAs. It might mean that some vets will give you a rescue discount. So, it's kind of the basic step of getting into rescue. I will say that I trapped my first couple cats without being TNR certified, but I did it later. So get that done. It's $10 well spent. Don't be afraid of what you're going to see. I do think that some people say, I feel so bad. And, but again, don't talk about it, be about it, right? The only way to feel better, hopefully, you can either ignore it, or if that's not your speed, you start doing something about it. Get started, then start building a network. I think a lot of rescuers will be happy to help newer rescuers, show them the ropes. Maybe start, giving some appointments or, things like that. So find a local network. A good way to do that is by just Googling your town or your neighborhood with, again, local TNR, and then seeing if there's a Facebook page that comes up or something like that.
Right.
And then the last piece that I think is really important is to not get lost in it. I do think that because of both the devastation and the joy that is part of the work constantly, it can be kind of addictive, and it can also feel like, well, I can never stop because, if I don't help, things will only get worse and, animals will die.
Yes.
Which is true, but, just like a doctor needs to go sleep so that they can perform a good surgery the next day, rescuers need to rest. And I have definitely run into that, and I am still constantly managing my exhaustion levels. Right. And, also you have to have some non-rescue friends, to be honest. It's important to have balance in your life.
But I do think that's the psychological piece is something else I wanted to talk about. And we can always do this at a later time too, because I think we're going to have a part 2 and a part 3 of this, because we got to like 5% of my questions because we just were talking so organically, which I think was great. But there's so much more, I think, to discuss in talking about TNR and rescue work.
I would say that part is really important to talk about. Just like I do think we should also at some point talk about how you fund this kind of work.
Yes,
and
that was
what is
a huge part of it too.
Ask for and not to ask for, because I think rescuers would burn out a little bit less if they felt more comfortable asking for help, whether that's financial or logistical, right? And I think it's important. Like, there was a rescue friend of mine who told me somewhat early on, why I don't feel bad about asking about money is, one, I didn't put the cats out on the street. I'm already providing a community service. And two, I'm already paying with my time. I shouldn't have to put all my personal money into it. The truth is, we all put a ton of our personal money into it.
Yes.
But I finally at some point stopped feeling bad about putting an Amazon wish list on there, on my Instagram.
Same.
So that people could send food. And that not only does it help logistically, it also helps with your morale when people see the work you do and support it in small ways. And, if someone sends me a catnip banana, it cost them $8 and it made my day. And I think that is something that the TNR classes should talk more about, how you build that support and infrastructure.
And how social media plays a big role in that, how it is very helpful to be good at social media, because I don't know that, like, in my cases, just speaking for me, that we would have been able to do all of the rescue work that we do, especially with the serious medical cases that we have encountered, without the social media following that we have. Because the followers are so kind and so generous and so involved and so happy to help that it has been astounding. And like you said, some days we'll get a box, from Amazon, from the wish list of just like a little bag of food or whatever, and a nice note that's just like thinking about you guys and your fosters. And it's so kind that it moves us to tears. And we have a little stack of all the notes that come with them to just keep for a day when you're maybe not feeling so great or so positive about what you're up to. And you can just read through those and be like, you know what? People care. Like, people are invested in the fact that we're doing this work on days where it feels like it's just us.
I don't know any rescuers who feel really comfortable asking for help, right? Also because you feel like there are other rescuers who might need it more,
Yes.
right? So it's not even just, if I was the only one, maybe it would feel easier to ask, but you also feel like, it's a limited pool of resources.
Yeah.
But again, those are things where community helps, and I'm so lucky that a lot of the rescuers who are my community, we help each other out, and whether that's like reposting each other's fundraisers or, foster requests or things like that. It's always somehow worked out, and I could not do even a fraction of what I do if it wasn't for the support of those other independent rescuers, for the support of Brooklyn Animal Action. Now I feel like I'm giving an Oscar speech, but it really is. I mean, for me now, I can so much more easily say, yes, I will take in this cat, because I know there's some sort of an infrastructure to fall back on. And really,
Right.
It starts with my husband, who is so tolerant, right? But in my own pets and, so forth. But it is also the other rescuers, and it is Brooklyn Animal Action who allow me to, tap into their network. So
Yes.
it's so fulfilling in so many ways.
And you'd also like to thank the Academy.
I would also like to thank the Academy and you, because you got me into all of it in the first place by saying, why don't you put a litter box out in your yard?
So I just want to say thank you so much to my guests, to Suzette and to Stacy. Thank you so much for being on this podcast, but also thank you so much for doing the amazing rescue work that you guys do, for your dedication to cats and community cats and doing TNR and everything that you do. And as I said before, I think this is going to be a multi-part discussion. So this is just part one. So viewers, listeners, you can stay tuned for parts 2 to infinity, because I think we really could go on forever talking about community cat and TNR work. So just stay tuned, and thank you again so much. All right, have a great day, you guys. Thanks for watching. Hiss and Tell is a subsidiary of my cat behavior business, Catitude Adjustment, and that's our channel name on YouTube, which is where you've watched this video most likely. If you'd like to engage my services as a cat behaviorist, you can find me at catitude-adjustment.com. Music is generously provided by Cat Beats.